Good evening and welcome to the Monday, July 2020 regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council. If you noticed, we had a little different from a gavel tonight. We had a gong. That is because a number of people have pointed out how ridiculous it is at home when I pull up the gavel and just bang the back of a notebook or something. So staff thought it would be funny to get a gong, and I think it's awesome. So start of a new tradition tonight. First item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to have Dennis Enslinger lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dennis. Next item on our agenda is reflection. I wanted to bring up two things. First, a profound rest in peace note to American hero John Lewis. To thoughts go out to his family and his friends and to the millions of people whose lives he's touched. And I also wanted to share a positive thought and point out to any of those who haven't seen in the news lately that there are at least 3 biotech companies in the city of Gaithersburg that are racing to come up with the world-saving COVID vaccine that we've all been waiting for. Those being Novavax, AstraZeneca, who had a big breakthrough today on testing, and Emergent Biosolutions, and who knows how many others are working on it here in the city. And we certainly put in a positive thought for them. If we can have a moment of silence, please. Thank you all very much. Next on our agenda is approval of minutes. Tonight we have 2 sets of minutes before you to approve. The first being the minutes from the regular meeting of Monday, July 6th. What is the pleasure of the council? Neil. Neil, you're muted.
I know.
Okay.
Thank you. I move approval of the minutes of the regular session held on July 6, 2020.
Mike.
I second.
Okay, we'll call the roll. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
And Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. That carries unanimously. The next set of minutes is from the work session on Monday, July 13th. What is the pleasure of the council? Lorianne.
Mayor, I'd like to move the approval for the work session minutes from July 13th.
Do we have a second? Rob Wu.
Second.
Okay, we'll call the roll again. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
And Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Okay, carries unanimously. Thank you, guys. Next, we have a resolution for appointment of our new city manager. Did I see Mike? Did I see your hand go up?
No. Go ahead. Finish your sentence.
Oh, that was it.
That was it?
Yeah, a resolution for council appointing Tanisha Briley as city manager for the city of Gaithersburg, effective on September 14th, 2020. Who'd like to make a motion?
Sorry, I have to find the the motion in the text here. If somebody else is ready, please speak up.
I have a printed copy. I'm not sure it's in the electronic. Doris, it's not in the electronic package, is it?
Here we go.
It came in too late, so.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move a resolution of the City Council appointing Tanisha Briley, the city manager for the city of Gaithersburg, Maryland, effective September 14th, 2020.
Thank you, Neil.
Second.
Okay, we'll call the roll. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu. I didn't hear that.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Okay, carries unanimously. We can say more about, I'll probably say more about this in front of the mayor and council, but it's this was a great process, and we ended up with 2 fantastic finalists, including our own Dennis Enslinger, and we'll speak about this further, but it's very exciting for all of us. So thank you guys. Next, I just dropped my agenda here. Next, we have a reappointment to the Senior Advisory Committee. What is the pleasure of the council? I know Councilmember Sesma asked to make this motion. Councilmember Sales, she is the liaison to this committee. We'll have you do the second of this motion. Go ahead, Sesma.
So I would move a resolution from the City Council confirming your reappointment to the Senior Advisory Committee for my good friend Carolyn Bass to serve a 2-year term on the Senior Advisory Committee to expire in July 2022.
Okay, Lori Ann.
Second.
Thank you. We will call the roll. Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
And Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. Carries unanimously, and we will congratulate Carolyn Bass when we see her. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Dennis for the employee recognition first quarter, and also the employee recognition for 2019 Employee and Team of the Year. Dennis, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council members, and the public. Typically, we do the awards for Employee of the Quarter in person, so this is a little bit different. We like to take the opportunity to publicly thank employees who have been nominated and selected for Employees of the Quarter and Employees of the Year. In addition, this year, with COVID, things changed slightly. So we've actually kind of divided the 2020 First Quarter Employee Recognition Awards into 2 categories. One is kind of pre-COVID pandemic, which ran from January 1st to 2020 through March 17th of 2020. And then we also had a secondary category for those employees that we would like to recognize as part of the post-pandemic. And we're really not in the post-pandemic, we're still there. That period was from March 17th, 2020 through April 30th. I'd like to congratulate Maria Membrio, who we all call Chillo, and the Census Organizing Committee team members for 2020 pre-pandemic. Chillo was nominated for her dedication and commitment to maintaining and cleaning the Kentlands Mansion on a day-to-day basis and for numerous special events. There isn't a time that I haven't been over at the Kentlands where Chillo hasn't been actively involved in helping community members with their special events. She's dependable, conscientious, and is typically the first to arrive every day, and often comes in on weekends and really needs to modify her schedule to accommodate the special events and does a great job at doing that. She also completes her work with a great deal of pride, dedication, and attention to detail that goes above and beyond expectations. And Brian, I'll have you do the first slide again so everybody can kind of, normally at this point we, Judd and I go down and we hand a certificate to the recipient, and Chillo's not here. So I wanted to kind of at least just do a round of applause quickly for her, because that's really about the only way, given the Zoom meetings, that we have the opportunity to do that. And then as Brian pulls up the next slide, really the team for pre-COVID pandemic was the Census Organizing Committee, and it's comprised of a staff of 4 different departments. Lauren Sukol, Britta Monaco, Jeff Baldwin, Amy McGuire, Samantha Sikalik, and Jimmy Fraser Bay. They were all from the Community and Public Relations Department. Kirk Eby and Steve Marquina is from the Planning and Code Administration. Nancy Wild from the Parks, Recreation, and Culture. And then Sergeant Scott Scarf, who's from the Police Department. As we all know, the census is done every 10 years, and we're counting every person residing in the United States. This population count is really critical to cities and counties and other jurisdictions, because it helps define our legislative districts and federal funding allocations based upon this data. The census team has worked since April of 2019 on developing a branding campaign. The branding campaign is I am Gaithersburg and I count. They created marketing materials, videos, social media information. They have also worked to involve the entire community in their outreach efforts and connect regionally and statewide with other jurisdictions to secure further outreach efforts and share best practices. They were really a leader in not only in the county, but also in the state. With these critical efforts, it's estimated that for every person not counted in Maryland, so we're encouraging people to still complete the census, the state could lose $1,800 for every year over the next 10 years in their federal allocations. I will note too that behind this organizing committee, there were roughly 50 people who also were background individuals helping to support all the efforts of the organizing team. And I wanted to make sure that they got recognition also as part of the employee awards for the first quarter. And with that, just a kind of another round of applause, since that's our only way of congratulating them at this point. And as I noted before, we also thought it was really important, because of all the changes that came about because of the pandemic, that we tried to recognize those individuals for the first quarter who made a real difference in how we transitioned to the pandemic conditions. So we also would like to recognize Bobby Fulmer. Brian, if you'll call up that slide, who is with our Planning and Codes Administration Department. She was nominated for her work in putting new policies in place to make it possible for the city to accept and process permit requests, allocations, and fees during the pandemic, as well as creating a lot of new online options for applications and other services with the city. I will say also, Bobby was instrumental in helping us to create our Safe and Welfare program as part of the phased restoration service program that we've set up here with the city. And she was a key member within her own department in that, and also citywide. So we'd like to recognize Bobby for those efforts that she did during the first quarter of this year and continue to do to this day. So thanks. And then the team of the pandemic portion of our awards is really the Telework setup team, which is the IT department. You can see this is a great team made up of all the IT staff members, including Pete Cottrell, Jim Conway, Mike Hober, Jacob Mescal, Yolanta Milner, Guy Goodenow, Rick Rolls, Zach Harris, Roland Miller, Brian Helms, Andrew Barnes, Renato Gomez, Tom Tracy, Jan Kim, and Justin McCubbin. The team was really critical for us to move to a telework in the pandemic conditions. The team accomplished an incredible amount of work in a very short period of time and with little notice. In addition to creating a functional system, they had to work with each teleworking employee to visualize their needs and find a way to make it work. And what I mean is, could you imagine trying to describe somebody without seeing their screen, how they would sign on remotely and what problems they might have without being able to look at how they were interacting on their own screen? The team installed the necessary software, allowed individuals to start up their computers remotely, and also created a great dashboard for all of us within the organization to track status of all the work and requests. And their efforts ensured that we were able to basically have over 100 employees to telework from home, and many of them are continuing to do that either in a full-time or part-time basis. So I wanted to congratulate them also for their efforts. And one of the other aspects that we do every year, and we're a little bit late doing this because normally what happens for the employee and team of the year, we make those announcements at the annual employee recognition lunch. And that was one of the things that we had to cancel based on the COVID pandemic. And so tonight we wanted to also honor those awardees. And so Brian, I think you should have the next set. So the Employee of the Year is Siobhan Homos, who is with our Parks, Recreation, and Culture Department. She is the winner of the Carl Webb Employee of the Year Award, named after a late Public Works employee known for his public service. Siobhan was the program supervisor for the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Culture and won the fourth quarter award for her accomplishments and dedication to the city's Parks Recreation program, including youth services programs, golf tournaments, and the use of public school facilities. I will note that Siobhan has actually retired, and we're trying to convince her to come back to work part-time. We're hoping that she does that. She was a great employee, and I know that she would be a great addition as a part-time employee during the current crisis that we have. So with that, I wanted to give her a round of applause also, rather than hand her a certificate since she's not here. And similar to the Employee of the Year, which is picked out of all the quarters of those who win the awards throughout the year, the winner of the Team of the Year award for 2019 is the Parks Maintenance Team from the Public Works Department. Composed of staff members Jason Brotwith, Mark Smith, Charles or Bill Gilbert, Andrew Rosenkrat, and Lloyd PR. They won the third quarter award in 2019 for their dedication and commitment and extra effort in helping to install Where Angels Play playground at Griffith Park. That was a unique playground that was installed in a very short time frame, and that honors the memory of the Gremwell family, who lost 3 family members, the mother and 2 children, when a plane crashed into their home in 2014. And they were a critical part of that crew. They helped prepare the site. They helped and worked with volunteers, which were numerous in those particular instances, because this was a community event. And so it shows how the Public Works crew and staff can really work with the community to make a long-lasting reflection in memory of 3 individuals who passed away in Gaithersburg. And with that, I'd like to give them a round of applause also. And that really is, that shows the dedication of staff throughout the year that we have. I will say that, especially in 2020, it's been really difficult to pick employees because we've had so many outstanding employees that have really risen to the occasion during the COVID crisis. And we will continue to recognize them on a quarterly basis throughout 2020. But we will probably also try to look at some ways to recognize the employees who've all put in a great deal of work to make sure that we are able to provide services during this critical time within the city. So I wanted to thank them personally again, even though we're talking about individual awards. I think all the employees kind of deserve kind of a round of applause for all the work they've done up to this point, because it's been a really difficult challenge. And with that, Judd, I will turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Dennis. On behalf of the council, we congratulate everybody. I'm sure some of us will have more to say about this in front of the mayor and council. But for now, I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, which is public comments. And tonight we're trying something new. We're going to use the Zoom feature for those who are in attendance who'd like to speak under public comments, to use the raise hand feature. If you're calling in over the phone, it'd be *9. Otherwise, just use the Zoom raise hand feature. And I'll note that if you'd like to speak on our public hearing, then just hold off for a couple minutes till we get to public hearings. The public hearing is about the landlord-tenant prohibiting rent increases during the COVID time. So if you're here to speak about that, then hold off for momentarily. But if you'd like to speak on any other topic, we ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address or neighborhood for the record. And I see Tim, Tech Team, if you could bring up Tim Goodfellow And Tim, when you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and then start your testimony.
Okay, good evening, Mayor Ashman and council members. I'm Tim Goodfellow. I live on Boysenberry Drive in Gaithersburg. I would like to speak tonight on the Travis Avenue and Watkins Mill Stream Restoration Project. I urge you to cancel the proposed stream project in Blum Park. I know the city is required to reduce sediment and nutrients as part of the Chesapeake Bay TMDL and the city's stormwater permit, but the proposed project, if constructed, will severely degrade and destroy key natural elements in the city's conservation park. The proposed project will remove over 100 trees that provide significant wildlife habitat and that shade Whetstone Run. These trees comprise the climate resilience forest that is Blum Park. The proposed project shows a wetland seed mix nearly 1 acre in size that replaces all of the existing woody vegetation in the most critical portion of the park's ecosystem, the riparian area. This is not restoring, it is destroying. The incredible damage that the project will do to the rich and valuable forests in Blum Park is not worth the sediment reductions the project hopes to achieve. The juice is not worth the squeeze. I urge the city to explore and choose capital projects other than the Blum Park project upstream in the watershed or on Walker's Run, a major tributary to Whetstone Run. The city's Middle Seneca Creek watershed assessment identifies numerous stormwater management facilities near Blum Park in the Whetstone Run watershed that have high potential for retrofitting in order to reduce sediment and nutrient pollution. These include the Hyde Park Stormwater Pond, that's the Village Overlook condominiums, and the 2 Woodland Hills stormwater facilities near Travis and Watkins Mill Road. It is wise and environmental management to focus on fixing existing infrastructure like stormwater ponds instead of destroying a forested conservation park. I suggest the city examine Walker's Run again. Walker's Run exhibits much more erosional stress than the portion of Whetstone Run in Blum Park. The culvert that carries Walker's Run under Christopher Avenue is failing badly. It's even a threat to Christopher Avenue. So I would suggest the city explore that as well. Finally, I urge the city to abandon this project and seek sediment reductions that do not decimate a forested community asset. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Next, tech team, if you could bring up Kathleen Bell. And Kathleen, just like with Tim, once you come up, just unmute yourself, state your name and address or neighborhood, and go on with your testimony.
Mayor Ashman and council members. My name is Kathleen Bell and I live in Montgomery Village. Thank you for this opportunity to speak about an issue that's important to me. I grew up in the woods in North Bethesda and played in a creek until it was paved over to make the Capitol Beltway. The Blum Park project is close to my heart. I'd like to know what proof you have that altering this calm and beautiful area will lessen sediment deposits in the Chesapeake Bay. Surely you can do something to this beautiful park besides destroying it. I oppose this project in total and I urge you to stop it. Meanwhile, please reopen the bridges so we can enjoy walking in this lovely space for as long as possible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, tech team, if you could bring up Vicki Georgie, that would be great. Vicki, once you unmute yourself, just state your name and address or neighborhood for the record and begin your testimony.
Good evening, Mayor Ashman and council members. I'm Vicki Georgie. I'm in the Montgomery Village Avenue, Maryland area, 19029 Millis Joyce Road. I would like to address the Watkins Mill Road Travis Avenue Stream Restoration Project in the city of Gaithersburg, which includes the stream named Whetstone Run. We speak on behalf and concerning the greater majority of residents who are stating they do not want this land altered or decimated. It seemingly becomes an unfair use of our taxpayer monies to know that the residents of Gaithersburg who live in the surrounding area have adamantly declared they do not want this project to go forward, and it seems we are being ignored. Further, this sentiment was also apparent in the questions section under the public meeting notes for the budget meeting on June 18th, 2020, a meeting that was not in fact intended for the specific purpose of a public hearing, but flanked under the premise of a budget meeting, which unfortunately prevented many residents from not knowing of such plans. This plan is a desecration of the land, and I'll hope you'll please understand that our rights are being uprooted along with the trees and wildlife you so feel is necessary to abolish in order to obtain needed credits for this municipality that will be redirected towards stormwater permit requirements. But you must know that as a community, we will not be bulldozed to think that we do not have a say and that we must stand silent while this occurs. No deadlines, nor will any groundbreaking deter us in standing firm that this has been done without the requests that we now put forward. Our requests are to provide a human impact study, as well as an independent study concerning the environmental impact. We would also like to know what the thermal pollution rate is, which has not yet been addressed. If you do not find these matters legitimate to halt the project, then we citizens, and namely the Green Coalition of Montgomery Village, will utilize additional constitutional avenues, such as engaging Governor Hogan, seeking a referendum on this item, and seeking legal assistance, as well as utilizing news outlet sources. We shall give you 30 days to contact our group, of which you have our contact information on record, and we will look forward to discussing this issue during that time. We truly appreciate your time, and we look forward to your cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak under public comments tonight? Going once, going twice. Okay. I see a few people here in attendees. I don't see raised hands, so that's fine. Maybe people are here for the public hearing. I thank everyone for your testimony. I believe that we will be. I anticipate a discussion about the stormwater project. Probably we'll do it from the mayor and council. For now, we're going to move to the next agenda item, which is our public hearing. And let me see who I'm calling. Sorry, I didn't have that up. Kevin Roman. Tech team, if you can bring up Kevin Roman, that would be great. And this is our public hearing on the prohibited, emergency ordinance to prohibit rent increases during the COVID-19 state of emergency. And the way this works is because it's it's introduced as an emergency ordinance, we're going to have the public hearing, we're going to hear from the public, and then it's our intent to vote on this issue later in the meeting. So Kevin, take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We are here tonight to conduct a public hearing on the proposed emergency ordinance to amend Chapter 13 of the City Code entitled Landlord-Tenant Relations, Article 3 entitled Landlord-Tenant Obligations, by adding a new section 13-13A entitled Prohibited Rent Increases During the COVID-19 State of Emergency. In the way of background, as we know, COVID-19 has caused many city residents to lose their jobs or endure loss of work and reduced income. And while we're still seeing timely rent payments being made, thanks to the stimulus funds and enhanced unemployment benefits, any increase in expenses during this uncertain time would be sure to cause financial strain, anxiety, and stress on already cost-burdened tenants. Accordingly, on July 6th, the Mayor and Council voted to introduce an emergency ordinance to amend Chapter 13 of the City Code, again by adding a new section 13-13A entitled Prohibited Rent Increases During COVID-19 State of Emergency. A legal notice of tonight's public hearing was published on the city's website on Tuesday, July 7th. And to date, we have received 3 written comments on the matter. The first was from a property manager of a small rental complex that is not in favor of the ordinance. Concerns mentioned in the comments include rising costs for the landlords, such as property taxes, insurance premiums, maintenance costs, and for the private landlords, homeowner association fees. Also, they cited that most landlords understand the impact that the pandemic has had on the tenants, and most landlords are working with their tenants to keep them in their homes, but ultimately they feel that landlords should be able to raise rent moderately to keep up with the rising operation costs. The second comment we received was from a resident of the Kentlands that supports the emergency ordinance, citing financial strain on already cost-burdened tenants, rise in unemployment, the need for extended assistance after the CARES Act and enhanced unemployment benefits expire, and the importance of tenants staying in their homes during a pandemic, and therefore not letting a notice of rent increase be the deciding factor to uproot a family during such a pandemic. And lastly, the last comment was received from a long-time apartment owner that has provided affordable housing over 60 years and has kept recent rent increases within the last few years to 2.4% or less. And while not increasing rent nor charging late fees during the pandemic, he expressed that the practice should be voluntary and not mandated, and therefore expressed support for limiting any rent increase to 2.6% during the state of emergency. The 2.6% is the Montgomery County Executive's rent guideline figure, and that is generated off of the rent component of the Consumer Price Index. And the purpose of our ordinance in its draft is to provide a level of temporary protection to residential tenants by prohibiting rent increases during and for a limited time after the COVID-19 state of emergency is terminated. The goal, obviously, is to help tenants stay in their homes during the pandemic by alleviating any additional financial strain a rent increase would cause. As currently drafted, the emergency ordinance would prohibit the increase of residential rent during and after declared state of emergency, prohibit certain notices of rent increases to tenants, require a landlord to provide a tenant a notice to disregard any rent increase notice that was issued in violation. The ordinance would apply only to residential tenancies at lease renewal, serve as a temporary protective measure that would expire and have no further effect after the 151st day after the state of emergency has been lifted. This is an emergency ordinance, therefore, following the public hearing, discussion, and public comment, council will need to make a motion to close the record. Staff is requesting that final action be taken later tonight.
Thank you, Kevin. Do we have questions or comments before we go to the public? I don't think I'm seeing any hands being raised. Okay. Well, then we will open it up for the public. Again, if you'd like to speak, just use the Zoom raise hand feature. If you're calling in on a phone, it's do *9 to raise your hand. Same rules as before. State your name, your address, or your neighborhood for the record. Who would like to speak this evening? I know some of you are here to speak on this topic, but I do not see hands being raised. I'm giving you plenty of time. Going once, going twice. Okay. Well, that concludes the public comment section of this hearing. Any question? Lorianne, please go right ahead.
Oh, no, I didn't have a question. I was going to make the motion to close the record.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'm going to take that as the motion. Neil, go ahead.
So I have the same question for Kevin that I had last time, hoping for some later information, which is, have we heard of situations where landlords are attempting significant rent increases during this situation?
Not significant, but we have seen 3.9%, 4%, and even 5%, which at this point during the pandemic, with the loss of employment and wages, any amount currently right now is substantial.
Yeah, I'm just surprised. I would expect that the economic forces would be pushing in the opposite direction.
And I think that's what we've seen nationally, that in some of the major cities, rents are actually starting to drop a bit.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you, Kevin.
Robert Wu.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kevin. Just want to follow up on that question. So obviously you came across the information somehow. Did it come to you in a complaint? Do we know if individuals who were suffering impacts related to job loss, income loss, or whatever the case may be, were in a situation where they were incurring rent increases and renewing their lease terms?
Well, initially, I think the mayor and council asked us to take a look at this because the adjacent jurisdictions, Montgomery County and Rockville, has passed similar ordinances. But yes, we have received a few, and when I say a few, it's probably been about 30 now of rent increase complaints during the pandemic. But again, the increases have been under 5%.
Mike.
So Kevin, can you explain again what the voluntary rental guidelines are from the county and what the cap is on that? I think
it's set at 2.6%. And that number is created from the rental component of the consumer price index. It basically is supposed to cover the cost of inflation.
Okay. And that's what the county ordinance does, right? It limits the increases to the VRG?
That's correct.
Okay. And then it looks like the city of Rockville and some other municipalities have passed an ordinance that allow no increase at all, even or to stay within a local voluntary rental guideline, correct?
Yes, Rockville was actually initially for, I think it was a period of 90 days. It was 0 increase. And then from August 1st on, limited to the 2.6%.
Okay.
Until the end of the state of emergency.
So ours again would expire on 90 days after the end of the emergency, which we have no idea when that is.
That's correct. We don't have that crystal ball to tell us when this will expire.
Now, the CARES Act has provided significant, some say significant, unemployment benefits to people who are eligible for that benefit, but a significant number of people in the United States and in our communities, in the county and the city, are probably not eligible for CARES Act support, correct?
That's correct.
Do we have any idea of what percentage of that is among our rental residents, you know, our month-to-month residents who may pay anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2 of their income on the rent?
Yeah, I don't know that number of how many residents that were not eligible for the CARES Act stimulus monies, but clearly I would imagine that we do have a high population.
Okay, so I think everybody needs to remember that eligibility is, it is for US citizens, not even for permanent residents, but it also, eligibility is affected by someone in your household who might not be a citizen, so that you're not eligible for that if you have a family member who is not a citizen, correct? I think that's correct. Does anybody know that? I mean, that's my experience, and that's what I remember reading about when that was passed. I see heads
I don't
nodding.
know that. I don't know one way or another on that point, Mike.
Okay.
Neil, go ahead. Oh, Mike, you weren't done? No,
that's fine. I just, so those are some facts that I want to lay out. So I think we do have a population that is particularly vulnerable to whatever increase, whether it's a minimal increase or whether it's one that we might regard as a little bit high.
Okay, Neil, and then Lorianne. I'll just remind everyone that Lorianne did put a motion to close the record on the table. Neil, go ahead.
So a technical point. So the concept in the document is that the ordinance is valid for 90 days after the end of the state of emergency. What is the reference in section E for the 150? No, the ordinance shall expire and have no further force or effect on the 151st day. Why is there a second deadline in this?
Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I lost connection somehow. I lost video, but that would be they want to extend it for the 90 days from the end of the termination of the of the state of emergency, and that additional 60 days is the notice that a landlord must provide to our city residents of a rent increase. So you got the 90 plus the 60 is 150, and so the at the 151st day, that's when the ordinance would sunset, and then landlords would be able to issue rent increases above whatever amount we set.
All right, thank you.
Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. So I just wanted to make an additional point after Mike's comments about residents and some people who aren't eligible for some of the CARES funding. It's not just residents or permanent non-citizens and permanent residents. It's people have lost their jobs, lost their incomes, and the $600 additional benefit that individuals were getting has sunset as of this month. So things are going to change. And I don't know if you've seen the numbers, but we're still seeing a rise in unemployment cases, and people are still finding it hard to even access their unemployment insurance resources. I was just meeting with Louise and Maureen last week to help a resident who is afraid of losing all of her belongings in her apartment because of her limited income and limited job prospects. So it's so many different variations. We can't even go on income right now because income is totally unpredictable for so many families.
Okay, well, we have a motion to close the record. Does anyone want to second it? Ryan.
Second.
Okay, then we will call the roll. Councilmember Harris. You're on mute.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sesma.
Aye.
Councilmember Sales.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Okay, the record is now closed. Thank you, Kevin. And we will go on to from the mayor and city council, and we're going to start with Councilmember Sesma.
Good evening, everybody. Let me, happy July 20th. First, I'm going to begin with a statement. A closed meeting was held virtually by the mayor and city council on Thursday, July 9th, 2020 at approximately 1:30 p.m. pursuant to a motion adopted unanimously. The meeting was proposed to be closed pursuant to the general provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, section 3-305B1I, the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom it has jurisdiction. The topic discussed was the hiring and selection process for a new city manager. Present at the meeting were Mayor Ashman, council members Harris, Sales, who arrived at 1:45 p.m., Sesma, Spiegel, and Wu. Also present was consultant Catherine Tuck Parrish, senior manager from the Novak Consulting Group, and the final candidates, Tanisha Briley, city manager of the city of Cleveland Heights, Ohio, and Dennis Enslinger, acting city manager for the city of Gaithersburg. Upon conclusion of the discussion, the closed meeting was adjourned at approximately 4:20 p.m. So I wanted to begin by echoing the mayor's comments about the passing of an American icon and patriot, John Lewis, an inspirational figure, but also one who represents thousands of people who fought for voting rights and civil rights in the 60s. But in particular, a number of us, perhaps personally, when we watched the news in the 60s, or when we read about it later and watched newsreels of the various protests and incidents that Congressman Lewis was involved in, he certainly brought home the issues of racial discrimination and the denial of rights that are granted to all Americans by the Constitution. And it was a noble fight and a great victory, and too long in coming. But I think many Americans, all Americans, owe something to owe a lot to Congressman Lewis, to John Robert Lewis, for his work, for his being a beacon of virtue and goodness and peace. And we are all diminished by his passing, but hopefully we will all carry on in his mission to make sure that equal rights that everyone realizes their equal rights under the law, under the Constitution of the United States. So I want to congratulate the first quarter award recipients for the individual and team awards, the employee recognition awards. So Chilo and the Census Team, you guys are doing great work. I want to thank you for that. And I want to remind everybody that there's still an opportunity if you haven't yet responded to the census. Stand up and be counted. Everybody counts. We are Gaithersburg, and so we need you to be counted. So I'm also very excited that Tanisha Briley will be joining us as city manager. I want to congratulate her and congratulate us, but also to welcome Tanisha. But I also want to thank and acknowledge our acting city manager, Dennis Enslinger. We've worked with Dennis for a number of years. He's been, I want to congratulate him on being one of 2 finalists, and we look forward to continue to working with you as in your role as deputy city manager. So you provided great service, and I hope you'll continue to provide it now. One thing I wanted to bring up is tomorrow the County Council will be discussing 2 proposals for a charter amendment that are to address the structural problems created by the Ficker Amendment in terms of which really limits property tax increases that the County Council can enact. And it creates a real structural problem in terms of actually being able to generate the revenue that is needed to provide basic services by the county, but also provide services that lead to good economic development, maintenance, and implementation of new infrastructure throughout the county, our school system, our community services, all of that. And you know, that amendment, the Ficker Amendment affects all residents and property owners of the county, not just those, including those who live within the city limits of Gaithersburg. So we need to think about that. I wanted to raise this because there are 2 proposals that the County Council will be discussing. One proposal by Council Member Friedston from District 1, and the other from the County Executive. And one of the major issues to be addressed is whether or not a vote from the council will require a unanimous vote or a supermajority vote to enact increases. And I think, you know, tax increases are always a question to be handled carefully, but if one looks closely at the structural problems in the fiscal health of the county that Gaithersburg is part of, I think it's important to recognize that the amendment needs to be corrected. And so I'm suggesting that we have staff take a close look at this. We all should take a close look at these charter amendments. They're likely to be referenda on the ballot in November. There may be 2 referenda to amend the charter on the ballot. It affects everybody in the county and everybody in our city. So I don't know if the council feels we should take a position on that, but we certainly should study it and consider it and advise our residents to do the same. So
Mike,
Yep.
Mike, if I could jump in, I would just say to Dennis, so, I mean, whether or not we're going to take a position, we should certainly have Jess take a look at what's being proposed and and keep us informed so we can decide if at some point we want to take a position. I think that makes perfect sense.
Yes, and Jess is aware of the 2 amendments. I sent her an email earlier.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, great. Just a couple of comments about our health. We've been under a heat alert or heat advisory for the last couple of days. Dangerous conditions related to the high temperatures and the high heat index, the triple-digit heat index. Just an advisory to hydrate yourself, stay out of the sun, stay indoors if you can. If you have elderly neighbors or neighbors with young children, please look in on them, especially if they happen to live in a home that doesn't have air conditioning. And then finally, there's some numbers today that we need to pay close attention to. 3.8 million. That's the number of COVID-19 cases, confirmed cases in the United States, 3.8 million. And 140,607. That's the official count of deaths attributed to COVID-19. It's probably an underestimate, and even the case number is probably an underestimate, anywhere from 5 to 15%, depending on which epidemiologist you might be talking to. So this virus is with us for a while. It's not a political virus. It doesn't care whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, a Libertarian, a Green Party member. It doesn't care whether you're young or old or a millennial. It can affect anybody. The number of cases is increasing on a daily basis. We're still in the first wave of this epidemic, and we need to be aware of it. So the best precautions we can do is to keep social distance. When you do encounter, avoid crowds indoors, wear a mask, wash your hands, do all of those things that are necessary to prevent the spread. Remember that you could be an asymptomatic carrier without any symptoms at all, but everybody you encounter would then be in danger. And that's why masks are important. So if you wear a mask, I think you're showing your respect for your friends, neighbors, and families. And you're willing to do that to protect them as well as yourself. So that's about it for me tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. We'll go to Lorianne.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So I also want to acknowledge the passing of our civil rights leader. It's so sad. I just watched his documentary not too long ago. So I'm sure his work will continue, and all of the energy and that he has put forth behind creating good trouble around progressing civil rights, inequality, and justice for everyone. So great time to acknowledge this icon. So this weekend, I held an event, the Talk, Walk, Listen event. It was a youth rally dedicated to listening to our youth and talking about some of the issues that have been disrupting our communities, and discussing recommendations and ideas for a path forward. I really appreciate Dennis attending. Tom Lonergan was able to make it out, and my colleague Neil Harris. So thank you all for attending. It was a really good day. I'm glad we're able to use our city parks for convene such events. And I just want to thank our youth leaders for their engagement, their advocacy, and their continued activism for justice and equality. I also want to acknowledge our Park and Rec staff for their tremendous coordination for their yoga and meditation activities in the park. They have yoga in the park on Tuesdays at City Hall, and then meditation in the park in the Kentlands. If you haven't had a chance to go out, you should definitely give it a try. We have really good teachers, so I'm glad that we are still able to continue with some of our outdoor activities and still practice social distancing and still safely engage with our residents. I also attended a blood drive hosted by my sorority, the Montgomery County chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. They had a blood drive last week, Friday, at the Montgomery County Fairgrounds. Almost 100 attendees gave blood, and during the pandemic, blood, platelets, and all sorts of donations are definitely needed. And so thank you to everyone who participated. And if you hadn't had a chance to give blood during the pandemic, please reach out to the Red Cross. They're always in high demand for donations. I also wanted to congratulate again our employees who were recognized for the first quarter 2020 awards and the 2019 Employee and Team of the Year award. I also want to thank our staff and Dennis again for distinguishing between the pre-pandemic and during the pandemic awards, because I think it's taken an extra level of ingenuity to really adapt to all of the changes and still make Gaithersburg a great place to be during this time. And so I just really appreciate everything that everyone's done to adapt to the changes. And then I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the resolution R4220 authorizing the acting city manager to enter into the contract for the stream restoration project in Bloom Park, and see if there is any support for staff to hit the pause button on this project while they provide more information.
Gloria, why don't you take a moment to make, if you'd like to make the case for it, and then we'll take comments from everybody else.
Sure. So I voted on a stream restoration project because the idea of stream restoration to a park that I regularly use, you know, living in a condo, the outdoors and access to the outdoor amenities within the community are very important, especially during the pandemic. And as someone who uses this park a lot, if you go to the park, you can see that the trails are overgrown. It's been neglected, to say the least. And so when I heard about a restoration project, I thought it would restore the natural beauty and increase accessibility to the park. And so when I heard about this project and started talking with staff about all of the details that were included in the project, it raised some red flags for me. We call ourselves the Tree City. The tree is our logo. It's very important to us. Seems like it's the heart of the city, and a project that is taking over 100 trees, I would think we would get more notice, especially more notice to the public. Additionally, the project calls for 5 months of inaccessibility to this park during the middle of a pandemic in a zip code that has some of the worst health outcomes on the east side of the city. In the entire county, this is the highest impacted zip code for COVID cases and health disparities. And to take away a park that offers quiet enjoyment of the outdoors just doesn't seem like it aligns with our value system. Now, while I know that we have stormwater management credits and we want to reduce runoff and erosion that goes to the Chesapeake Bay, but I've also researched ways that don't have such impacts. such stream restoration projects that don't require the removal of hundreds of trees, but would instead use different technology to achieve the same outcome. And so I have a lot of concerns about the project. And when my neighbors found out about the project, when I went on a tour that our staff member, Beth, was leading with one of the local watersheds, this is when I learned about, the tree removal, the removal of the bridges, the flooding of the park, how it would be inaccessible. We don't know what will be left of the park after this restoration effort is completed. And so it's just, it's concerning to me that not more care and outreach, compassion was taken in deciding a project of this scale and engaging the communities that would be impacted with what their impact would be over the course of the next 5 months or maybe longer. So.
Thank you, Lorianne. So in terms of notice and this, just to give a little history of the project, which I've been sending out to a number of members of the public who've sent in emails about this. Some of these decisions, we set ourselves on track to do this project and others. It's taken years. I think it's around 2013 or early 2014 when we set ourselves on this path. And the reason why these things take so long is because they're hugely expensive. But I wanted to bring Dennis in to answer one question. I'll let others chime in on some of the points that you've made here and where they stand on the motion to reconsider. The question for you, Dennis, is about the timing. Obviously we have a permit requirement. We have to remediate X number of stormwater facilities in X time. And it does, Lorianne is correct. If this goes forward, then as it's been, it has been voted to go forward. If it continues to move forward, then the park is going to be impacted during this time of pandemic. Why is it important to keep that schedule?
I think there are a number of reasons why it's important to keep that schedule based upon the constraints. And Mayor Ashman, you kind of hit one of them already, which is, the construction of these projects takes a long time in terms of planning and organization. When the watershed studies were done in 2013, we identified a number of projects that are starting to come to fruition. And so it does take us a while to figure out which projects are the most viable from a balance of a number of different things. One is, available land area, the credits that we would get under our permit, cost of the project. In addition, once we've identified kind of those initial projects, it's about a 3-year lead time from the design to the final construction. And so you could see under a 5-year permit, that's 3 of the 5 years. So we really do have to plan these out far in advance. In addition, in particular to this contract, one of the constraints we also have is under MDE regulations, we cannot do work within any stream activity unless it's an emergency activity from about March 1st to June 15th. So in order to get this project done before March 1st of next year, we need to start it as soon as possible. And again, some of those constraints come into what type of weather we're going to have during the winter. But you can see we're already about we've lost a month of that opportunity just based on the procurement schedule and other things that come into play. So those are kind of 2 of the key constraints that we have with this particular project. We have a long lead time to develop these projects, and then we have to implement them when they're ready to go. And then we also have constraints where we can work within the stream bed. Even a delay of 3 or 4 months would mean that this project could not get done this year. And so we might not be able to meet our full credits within the permit period that's currently underway. We're in the second year of that 5-year permit. As you noted too, I think you alluded to that, we do know that Blum Park will be closed, or a portion of it will be closed. We're still looking at some alternatives, but I will note that the Great Seneca Stream Valley Park, which is not actually in the city of Gaithersburg, but which is adjacent to Blum Park, it's a Montgomery County park, is another opportunity for residents and surrounding community members to use during the COVID epidemic. It's actually immediately adjacent to Blum Park, and there is some access through Blum Park, but also along 355.
Council members who'd like to weigh in here? Rob Wu, please go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to Dennis Dennis and Beth as well, and we all know Beth, who's with our stormwater program, for giving the time to sit down with me to discuss this project, as well as Beth's time. Mayor, as you know, yourself and Councilmember Harris and I took a tour of the park this few days ago to get more information on this project. And so I don't want to cast blame in any direction. I just want to relay kind of what I've told you in private is my consternation with kind of the lack of information available to us for making a decision on this project. And I understand the long lead time and the study that was done in 2013, 2014. But my expectation is that when an issue is presented to the council, that all information is presented to us to make a decision. And respectfully, I feel that wasn't the case here. And so, Lorianne has made the motion. I'll second the motion. And the reason I do that is because City Attorney Lynn Board has kind of laid out a process here where, and I think it's a good process to take a look here that may not impact the project at all, where we do the motion tonight for reconsideration, which would then place a resolution to rescind the prior resolution on the next mayor and city council meeting. But what that would also do, and my expectation would be, is that we have a more fulsome presentation of this project, the issues surrounding this project. And I can go directly to staff with my specific concerns so that the information that's presented at the next mayor and council meeting, assuming this motion is successful, then we would have a more fulsome presentation on the ramifications of the project, the specifics of the project, allow for more public input. And at that point in time, the council can make a decision as to whether or not to vote on the specific resolution rescinding the prior resolution. Lynn, is that correct as far as the procedures? And thank you again for sending that email. It was very helpful.
Yeah, procedurally that would be correct. You would need a motion this evening to reconsider, and then it could come back on August 3rd for more a fuller discussion. And then if the council would choose a motion to rescind the prior resolution.
Yeah, so I'd be in favor of that, and that's why I'm seconding Lorianne's motion.
Okay, who'd like to go next? Don't rush in, guys. Neil.
All right, I guess it's my turn. So first of all, was there a motion to reconsider as opposed to rescind? Is that the motion that Lorianne made?
The motion is to reconsider.
All right, that's fine.
And then seconded, and then
that's fine. That's all I was looking for.
Yeah.
So again, as Rob Wu said, I spoke with Beth Forbes last week, and we agreed to go take a look at the park in person. Judd and Rob were there as well. 106 trees is a lot, but it's a huge park. So it's the apocalyptic emails we're getting are, I think, maybe a little over the top considering what's going on. I think the challenge here, and I thank Dennis for taking the time to really walk me through how this permitting process works, is that the state of Maryland's Environmental Protection Department has decided that it's the easiest way to comply with the EPA's regulations here is on the basis of how many acres we treat. I know some suggestions were made that seemed reasonable, like for the city to promote rain barrels at townhome developments and things like that that really capture and treat stormwater runoff before it gets into the streams and things. The challenge is that the way we're being graded for this isn't really applicable. We can't cover enough acres of compliance this way. So I would hope that if that we talk to Jess, our government relations department, and see if we can't have some conversations with the state of Maryland. I know that's going to be an uphill struggle, but to try to come up with a better way to deal with these so that we don't have to take a blunt force approach to these and take a 25-acre park and really have a big impact on it. But again, it's a big park with a lot of trees. 100 is not the end of the world. If we decide to go forward with it, with the project at this point, it would be my commitment, and from what I've heard of conversations with my colleagues, I suspect that we'll come on board with some long-term remediation project. Now, I know there's already a commitment to replace the 100 trees with 140. Of course, those would be newer, smaller trees than especially a couple of the really big ones that are coming out. But I think taking a look at this park, it's really time for an upgrade. I remember about 15 years ago, long before I was on the council, having conversations with the city's Parks and Rec Department and Public Works Department about the rundown nature of the trails near Lakelands. It appeared to me at that point that the city had forgotten that those are city trails. And once the city recognized that those were in fact the city's responsibility, they came out and groomed those trails, and they've been a real asset ever since. And I think Bloom Park is probably long overdue for that sort of treatment, connecting the trail network to the adjacent parks that belong to the county, revisiting the bridges, which my understanding is were actually not built by the city, but were Boy Scout projects. Perhaps we can revisit those and see what other amenities can be put in. So one way or another, I'd like to see the city focusing as we go forward on doing the right thing one way or another. We need to comply with stormwater permits and regulations, and the clock is ticking on that. This is not a slam dunk. One last point that I'd like to make is this process has been going on since 2013, 2 years before I was on the council and before Councilman Wu and Councilwoman Sales were on the council as well. The level of communication and outreach to the public, I don't think was adequate here. And I would hope that we would take this as an object lesson and do better and making sure that, you know, we're not up against a situation where we're doing these projects and it's at the 11th hour or 11:59 at this point, people become aware that we're doing something that they really should have weighed in on years ago. So we need to do better at communication and outreach. I think that's our bad, and it's something that I think we've struggled with in the past, and we really, really need an upgrade in that process.
Thank you, Neil. I'll just echo that for a second there and just underscore one point that yes, there are, as part of this project, they'll have to take out 106 trees, including 2 specimen trees, but they will be replaced. Our own rules, and the reason why we've been a tree city for 29 years is because we have a 1-to-1 replacement. Sometimes for projects come along and trees have to be removed, but the city requires a 1-to-1 replacement. In this case, it's going to be more than that. We are committing to replacing the 106 trees with 140. I saw Ryan's hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the concerns that have been raised, but I generally agree with what Neil has said. I think, unfortunately, there appears to be a lot of misunderstanding of what this project is and why it's needed. And the city should take responsibility for not doing more outreach and education along the way. But the merits of the project determined, admittedly many years ago, but through a comprehensive and open process that you and I and Councilmember Sesma and the other council members at the time were involved in, a very public process. I agree with Neil that, that happened a long time ago. And so there really should have been more recent increased outreach and education efforts to explain what was on the horizon before we took the final vote. But the reality is that this project is designed to and will improve the long-term environmental conditions in this area and for the region and the Chesapeake Bay. It will remove invasive and damaging vegetation. It will be a net increase in trees in the park. And it's the kind of project that's mandated and encouraged by these federal and state laws and these permits that are subject to specific deadlines that we are required under these federal and state regulations to meet. And we hired outside experts to work with us back in 2013 and since then as well. It was a very deliberative process to identify the places around the city where we could, where we still had an opportunity basically to proceed with projects that could make a significant positive impact on our stormwater management requirements, which ultimately is an environmental initiative. And I acknowledge that changing the landscape of a beloved park is a hard pill for people to swallow, but that doesn't mean that it is hurting the environment. Even the removal of trees can be a hard pill to swallow in the short term as a temporary measure, but that doesn't mean that the ultimate end of the project and result of the project isn't going to be improved environmental conditions. This is a project years in the making. It's not standing alone. There were other projects throughout the city that were identified, many of which have been, or some of which have already been done, including in the Lakelands area and the West Deer Park area as well. So it's not as though this park in particular was targeted for any kind of destruction. It's not as though we're building a parking lot or a strip mall there. And we're investing a significant portion of funds that are dedicated specifically, collected by city residents and dedicated specifically for this stormwater management fund to do this kind of project. And in the short term, the lack of access to the park and the loss of trees in the short term is unfortunate. It's really unfortunate, but it would be incorrect to think about this as somehow a plan to hurt or destroy the environment. It's really the opposite. And the experts that we brought in over these years are the people who really know and understand how these processes work, and what the benefits are of these projects. And I think we need to provide a little bit of deference to these experts, including our own in-house expert on these projects. And the technology for how we deal with stormwater and how we clean particulates out of the water before it ends up going into the Potomac River or the Chesapeake Bay has evolved a lot in the last 20 years or so. And so what people might be familiar with when they think about stormwater management, or they think about environmental landscaping, may not necessarily be what the latest and greatest science is telling us about the most efficient way to have environmental landscaping that maximizes stormwater management. And so I understand there can be a disconnect and it can be really frustrating. But given all of that, and given the long and deliberative arc of this project, despite what I think have been some shortcomings and missed opportunities, I don't think it's appropriate at this point to reconsider the unanimous vote that we took at our last meeting to approve this project and move forward. As has been said, we have a tight window to do the work in order to accomplish the benefit that we're trying to achieve here. And a delay could not only throw uncertainty into our procurement process and into our ability to move forward with the benefits of this project, but it could also, I think, send perhaps not the best signal to the vendors that the city does business with to try to improve our environmental landscape. However, I also strongly agree with Neil that there were a lot of missed opportunities for outreach and education in recent months and years, and we have got to do a better job. And that is on us as a city. And even if we're meeting the basic requirements of state and local laws in terms of open meetings and public notices, we need to understand that the people in the community are not always able to carefully track all of those notices, and we need to be more proactive in the way that we do outreach and solicit input and feedback, and make sure that people's concerns are being aired and that we have the full picture before we proceed. We've got to do better at that. And so I really agree with Neil that we need to ask staff to put together plans and proposed processes to improve the way that we communicate with the public about these types of projects going forward. I also strongly agree that we need to accelerate the process of developing proposals for amenities that we can invest in to improve this park once it's reopened. I don't think it's right for us to wait until the end of this stormwater project construction phase to start talking about funding and planning and constructing amenities. I think they should run in parallel, and we should move quickly to start the process of soliciting feedback as to what kind of amenities members of the public want to see in this park and what kind of plans we can put together so we can act quickly when this stormwater construction project is complete to install better amenities for the future. I also think as part of the outreach and education, we need to proactively connect with the nearby residents to talk about other park and recreation opportunities that they can take advantage of in the interim while Blum Park is closed for 5 or so months, including the county park that Dennis mentioned, the Great Seneca Stream Valley Park, which is actually right adjacent to Blum Park, but isn't actually in the city. It's a Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission county park. And by comparison, the Great Seneca Stream Valley Park, Section 1, which is the largest section of 9 different sections that run throughout the county. Section 1, which is the section right next to Blum Park, is 460 acres. And that compares to Blum Park's 30 acres. And it includes the trail, the Seneca Creek Greenway Trail, which runs sort of the north-south length of the Great Seneca Stream Valley Park, and is a great amenity for those of us in the area to use. Now, it's not ideal to tell people that they can't use Blum Park if they like Blum Park and that they should go for 5 months and use this other park, but at least it's something. And for many of the folks who've expressed concern, a number of them live in the Montgomery Village area, actually outside the city. And here's a county park that's available to them as county residents that they could use. And so I think as part of our communications and improved outreach, we ought to be doing what we can to help steer folks to these amenities and make it easier for them to take advantage of these amenities, particularly in the short term while Blum Park is closed. But ultimately, while I think we should have a more fulsome presentation, as Councilmember Wu said, we can direct staff to give us that presentation at the next meeting or at another future meeting in the near future. But that doesn't necessarily mean we have to vote to reconsider the decision we've already made. We can demand a better education and outreach program. We can demand a more fulsome presentation, and we can demand accelerated processes for considering amenities of the park, independent of whether or not we were to reconsider the vote to approve this project. And so I agree, we ought to demand those things, and we ought to work with staff to get those things going right away and make progress, and we ought to take responsibility on those communication and outreach issues. But ultimately, the merits of this project, to me, are still persuasive. And even though there are some cons, certainly, particularly in the short term, the pros outweigh the cons for the environmental impact and for the requirements that we have to meet as a city.
Mike, you've waited a while. Take a shot.
You know, it's always a good thing to follow Ryan because he's exhaustive in his explanation and history, and I think that's very important. I want to thank Ryan for that. I'm basically in agreement with Neil and Ryan on this in terms of acknowledging and recognizing our deficiencies in explaining this project to the public the entire public, not just the folks who live close by and who use the park every day. But I think, you know, we started on this in early 2013. 3 of us on the council were, I think it was unanimous in our decision to move forward with our stormwater management plan, to identify those areas in the city that we looked at as low-hanging fruit in terms of where we could make the easiest improvements first. I think it's important to recognize that that there will be a short-term impact, and I think that the problem with that is people focus on the short term without thinking about the long term. I like to think that these projects, and I think we have evidence already from the projects that have been completed, is that we have to look out for the long term, and those projects in the long term have resulted in improved parks and streams that are within the city. I think Ryan made a point that the trees, many of the trees that are going to be removed and other vegetation going to be removed are damaging and invasive species. And I think it's important to note that our intent is to replace vegetation with native vegetation, whether they're trees or shrubs and grasses. You know, the park will look a little bit different for a while, but I think in the long run, it'll be an improved park, an enhanced park. And it doesn't make sense for us to begin to do other improvements in terms of amenities in the park until we finish this issue as well. I think the danger in delaying is that, number one, we've spent money already on a design and a project going forward. We have a limited period in time in which this project can be completed on the current contract. We want that done. But I think when we come back around, if we did reconsider and delayed this and went back to a design phase, it would end up costing us more to do this project. And I think we would largely, the plan we would end up would be largely the same that we are already looking at. I will call attention to the fact that we have had some considerable turnover in our staff that manage the stormwater management program. That has lent itself to I think the deficiencies in outreach and communication. But I think, you know, we have to be accountable for that, and we have to take care of that. I think the biggest concern I have is, while, you know, as a pay-as-you-go city, we have to plan these things long in advance and make sure that we have the funds in the bank to pay for them when we do implement them. So that means that a previous council may have made a decision, adopted a strategy, and determined, using the best information and data available at the time they made that decision, to move forward with the plan. And I'm concerned that because whenever you have an election and you have new council members, I'm concerned that the next council might want to go back and look at our established strategies, our decided upon strategies and plans, and think that we have to revisit every one of those. And I think there's some danger in that as well. I think we went through a very public process to get to where we are. I think how we got to where we are in the current plan, the problems of that and the deficiencies there, I think have been clearly articulated by all of my colleagues. So that's acknowledged. But I think the project that we're going to end up with here is going to be a better project, and one that we can be rightly proud of. And hopefully the residents that were concerned about this the most will be pleased with the outcome. And I hope they stay around long enough to realize that it's going to be a great improvement. And it will be an improvement. And basically, the county will have to consider the things we've done in order to make their changes and improvements in their park, their adjacent parkland, compatible with the changes that we've made, because the county has the same responsibility to meet these requirements for managing stormwater runoff. So I am not in favor of the motion to reconsider. So there's no sense in repeating everything that Ryan and Neil said about this. I'm basically on board with that, and I'm ready to acknowledge where we made some mistakes. We're not done with our program. Program is in midstream, to coin a phrase. We've got a lot more work to do within the city, and certainly I think staff and council realize that it's very important that our process remain very public, that we solicit as much input as we can. But ultimately, it's going to be the environmental engineers that help us decide what the best plan is going to be. So even if we looked at this again, I'm not sure that any environmental engineers and design firms would come up with a plan that's much different than the one we're looking at now. So that's my position.
Does anybody else want to add anything more before we vote on the motion? Okay, not seeing that. So Lorianne, go right ahead.
Yes, I would just like to add just a few more points. You know, if this reconsideration does happen, it would come back to the mayor and council in 2 weeks, and staff would come back in 2 weeks. So the timeline for the project, should we continue to move forward based on the information we receive, I don't think the project timeline would be impacted with us getting more information. And I think one shared sentiment that everyone has communicated this evening is the lack of engagement and outreach to the public and information about the project to the public. We can't say on one hand that, you know, we are really glad about the outreach that was done 7 years ago, but now we're getting inundated with information, with feedback from residents based on information that they're only just finding out about the project. So it's not matching up. We can't get hundreds of emails since more information has been revealed about the project and more concerns, but lots of outreach has been done, and this is 7 years in the making. It just doesn't add up to me. And we still haven't found out what the accessibility is for the park. And while we can do things simultaneously, if something does come up that is, you know, in total conflict with, you know, what we initially thought, and we're already steamrolling ahead literally with this project, I don't know what recourse there could be, so.
Oh, you know, I want to respond to one thing that you just said, Lorianne. I'm sorry, are you done?
Oh yeah, I'm done for now.
So, you know, many of the letters have been filled with hyperbole and exaggeration and inaccurate information about the plan. Even the plan that many feel is insufficient in terms of describing the changes. That, you know, that being what it is, I received many emails over the weekend, but I would never put it in the category of hundreds. So if you have a better count than I have, perhaps you have more emails than I've received. But all those emails that have been received, I believe, have been shared among the entire council. So I think hundreds would be another example of hyperbole in this case. So if I'm wrong, then show me the data. Okay, but let's stay with the facts and the data. I think you know, we can go back to almost every letter and look at errors and mistakes that are made and assumptions that are made about what the plan that's being proposed. I think we certainly need a presentation to explain exactly what the plan is. I'm satisfied that it's a reasonable plan. I know that we're going to replace 100 trees, 104 trees with 140. That's a pretty good bonus for me. I'm quite confident that the plan and the outcome of this is going to be one that will be a major improvement over what the park would have been had these improvements not been made. So that's it. Thanks.
Any other comments, guys? Okay, not seeing any. Then we have a motion and we have a second, and we will call the roll. So this is the motion to reconsider. All in favor say aye, any opposed say nay. We'll start with Councilmember Sesma.
Nay.
Councilmember Sales.
Yay.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Nay.
Councilmember Harris.
Nay.
Councilmember Wu.
Is it aye or yay?
It's aye, but I know how Lorianne was voting.
Aye.
Okay, so the motion fails 3-2 with Councilmember Sesma, Harris, and Spiegel voting nay. Now, just to remind us where we were in front of the mayor and council. Lorianne, I don't know if you had any more that you wanted to add, or if we should go on to the next council member.
Nothing more to add.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councilmember Spiegel.
Thank you. Good evening again, everyone. I want to echo the congratulations and the warm welcome to our new city manager, Tanisha Briley. We look forward to having her join us in roughly around mid-September, we think. And I want to salute Dennis Enslinger for doing an outstanding job in the process and being our other finalist. We're all, I think we can fairly say we're all very proud of the great interviews that he had and the great presentations that he made in this process, which made our decision extremely difficult. But we're also very happy that Dennis is still here with us and playing such a critical role now as acting city manager and in the future as deputy city manager. I also want to add my congratulations to all the employees who were recognized earlier in the meeting for winning the quarterly and annual awards, particularly the parks maintenance team that worked on the new tot lot at the park next to City Hall, together with the Where Angels Play Foundation and a variety of other volunteers. And I was glad to be able to put some of my own sweat equity into volunteering to help put together that playground in memory of the family members that were lost. And to the Census Team, who I've worked pretty closely with over the last year or so, not only in my role in Gaithersburg, but also many of them in my role as MML president, prioritizing the importance of the census to cities and towns throughout the state, and figuring out creative ways to continue to make progress on the census, even in the time of a pandemic and social distancing. They have been doing exceptional work, and they really believe in the mission of the census count. So congratulations to all of them as well. I want to add my comments about the loss of the great civil rights icon and a personal hero of mine, Congressman John Lewis, and perhaps a little less well-known but very important civil rights leader, Reverend C.T. Vivian, who also passed away in the last week or so. Congressman Lewis and Reverend Vivian and folks like Congressman Elijah Cummings and others really were the voices of our national conscience, many of them cut from the same mold. And the reality is that they are a fading generation, and it's up to all of us to carry on their legacy and pursue the unfulfilled promise of American justice and equality. And so I hope we all take the time as we mourn the loss of Congressman Lewis and Reverend Vivian to recommit ourselves to that legacy and that mission as we go forward. I also wanted to share some good and interesting news. I serve on the Climate, Energy, and Environmental Policy Committee of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. And today, the Council of Governments circulated a draft community-wide greenhouse gas inventory, which shows that the city of Gaithersburg has decreased our greenhouse gas emissions by 22% between 2005 and 2018. That's a pretty significant drop. There's more work to be done, but I think that's a pretty exciting statistic that we've managed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the city by 22% over that time. The draft is subject to some input and revision, but that's what it shows at the moment. And I think we ought to be proud of that, but we also ought to use it as an opportunity to continue to work towards driving that emission number down significantly farther. Councilmember Sesma already mentioned the heat advisory. I just want to remind everybody to pay particular attention to your pets if they spend any time outdoors. You cannot leave dogs outside in this weather for an extended period of time. So make sure that our human family and friends and neighbors and our animal family and friends and neighbors are being cared for during this heat advisory, which should probably last into tomorrow. And then finally, I just wanted to share with everyone, for better or worse, the Maryland Municipal League Executive Committee of the Board of Directors had to make the difficult decision recently to convert the annual fall conference into another virtual conference, as we did with this summer's annual conference. The fall conference was scheduled to be hosted by the City of College Park. And so unfortunately that is not going to be an in-person event, and it looks like we're going to do a virtual fall conference in October. So stay tuned for more details, but at least we know we can do a successful virtual conference after we were able to do so this past summer. That's all I've got this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. We'll go to Councilmember Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks. I want to thank the city staff, not just the award winners, and the awards were well deserved, and but the entire city staff for guiding us through this COVID process. I know it's been very challenging for everyone, from things like having to learn how to telework for the first time on a mass basis, but in general, making really good decisions in order to keep our staff and our citizens healthy. So thank you very much, and it's much appreciated. And I guess it will continue for the foreseeable future at this point. As Lorianne mentioned, I attended her really nice event, the Talk, Walk, and Listen event on Saturday. It was really great being outside in the heat from 11 till 1. Maybe we can schedule the next one for a little bit cooler time of year, but it was a very productive event. I didn't do much talking or walking. I did a lot of listening, and there were a lot of young people that had important things to say. I also want to point out that our chief of police, who was there to mainly guide people along the path, made a very impassioned, off-the-cuff statement regarding the realities of policing, especially in the city of Gaithersburg. We're hearing a lot about some serious issues with police forces in other parts of the country. And I'd like to point out that in my experience, and from what I can see of Gaithersburg's policies, is that, you know, we keep the police force doing the right things here, and the police here really are trying to make things better and not be abusers. And the chief really wanted to make that very clear, especially after some of the things that were said about other jurisdictions. I'd also like to separately thank Congressman Trone. David Trone held a teleconference last week where he invited a number of local elected officials to come in and basically make requests. If I knew he was actually taking requests, I would have had a bigger dollar sign attached to what I was talking to him about. But seriously, a lot of the conversation was focused on what the federal government is doing financially to help people through this crisis. You know, as you've heard in public and tonight's meeting, some of the unemployment benefits, extra unemployment dollars are expiring at the end of July. They are working on extending those benefits and trying to come up with other ways to help without some of the less kind things, like the one elected official who I won't talk about but lives in the White House suggested eliminating or reducing the payroll tax, which of course provides all the funding for Medicare and Social Security, which it's hard to imagine a more terrible concept, and especially given what's going on. So Congress seems to be trying to do the right thing, and I know it's very tough in Washington, but I wanted to reach out and thank Congressman Trone for providing us that opportunity and for taking our input. And lastly, again, to reiterate what a lot of people have already said tonight, I thought that the city manager selection process, especially those last couple of days, were very productive. Both finalists did themselves proud, had a chance to meet with city staff, with senior staff as well as the line staff, and a couple of online conferences with the general public as well as the small group meetings with the elected officials here. And I thought everybody did themselves proudly, and I think the city is in good shape. And at that point, I will leave it. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. We'll go to Councilmember Wu.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to just echo everyone's comments and then read this statement. After closed executive session, closed meeting was held virtually by the mayor and city council on Friday, July 10th, 2020 at approximately 8 a.m. pursuant to a motion adopted unanimously. The meeting was proposed to be closed pursuant to the general provisions article of the Annotated Code of Maryland, section 3-305B1I, the appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, discipline, demotion, compensation, removal, resignation, or performance evaluation of appointees, employees, or officials over whom it has jurisdiction. The topic discussed was a debrief and deliberation for the hiring and selecting of a new city manager. Present at the meeting were Mayor Ashman, council members Harris, Sales, Sesma, Spiegel, and Wu, who arrived at 8:30 a.m. Also present was consultant Catherine Tuck Parrish, senior manager for the Novak Consulting Group, and final candidate is Tanisha Briley, city manager of the city of, well, formerly city manager of City of Cleveland Heights. She's now the city manager of the City of Gaithersburg. So do we have to amend that? Anyway, Ohio, and Dennis Ensley, our acting city manager / deputy city manager for the City of Gaithersburg. Upon conclusion of the discussion, the closed meeting was adjourned at approximately 2:40 p.m. C'est fini.
Thank you, Councilmember Wu. I want to echo everyone's thanks and congratulations, particularly to all of our award winners. And that's one additional shout out to our IT team, Brian Helms, who secretly got me this gong to enhance our meetings. But in all seriousness, he and Andrew have been lifesavers in keeping the public meetings going in the city, and there's only more coming as we get back into doing committee meetings. There's just going to be more and more work for these guys, but we appreciate them greatly, as well as all of our award winners. And I want to join everyone in congratulating Tanisha. We look forward to welcoming her. And I also wanted to just make a quick statement. You know, and this is part of what a statement I wrote to staff last week, late last week, which is that choosing a city manager is one of the most important and consequential decisions the council members and I get to make for our community. Gaithersburg has wonderful, unique, important traditions to preserve, and we also have ambitious goals to aspire to. It's our city manager who gets to bring all that to fruition, lead our operations, inspire our staff, and take us to the next level. And it was with all that in mind that the council members and I approached this process, taking great care to consider applicants from as many angles as we could envision. And we were very impressed with Tanisha Briley. We were also very impressed with Dennis Enslinger. When you have 90 applicants, when you narrow it down to 2, those 2 are there for a reason. But we thank Dennis, and I've thanked him privately and publicly. But I also wanted to take a moment to thank the members of the public who participated in this. We had, in particular, a Zoom meeting that was open to members of the public who were interested in hearing from our finalists and asking questions. And there were around 90 participants, which is great participation. And we received feedback from most of them. And the council and I read every single thing, every single iota of feedback that we got from members of the public, as well as another that we got from staff. So I just wanted to say thanks. It really meant a lot to us. And it was helpful in our process. I will note that next week we have our Monday work session, July 27th, to discuss the sketch plan application of 700 North Frederick Avenue. And again, this will be done virtually. You'll be able to sign up if you're interested in being on the Zoom to offer testimony that evening. So that will be, again, next Monday night, July 27th, and then the next regular meeting of the Mayor and Council will be on Monday, August 3rd. And with that, we'll go to from the acting city manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to highlight just a couple things. As many of you noted, we did honor the Census Organizing Committee. So I thought it was fitting that we provide a little update on the census data in terms of response rate. So Gaithersburg's self-response rate sits about 66%. That is above the national average, which is at 62. However, it's lower than the Montgomery County average of 72%. So we're still encouraging residents to self-respond to the census. You can do that through October 31st of this year. There will be enumerators going around the community starting on August 11th. Don't feel like if you're uncomfortable answering the door for that individual, you can still fill out the census, as I noted before, up until October 31st. And you can go to my 2020 census .gov to get more information with regarding to that. I also wanted to highlight, this will be the third week that the city's entered what we would call our phase 2 in terms of city operations. That did involve opening up additional facilities that started on July 6th. We currently have the water park open, the miniature golf, the farmers markets have also opened. I would encourage residents to use those facilities. We have implemented a number of safety protocols that we are thankful that the residents have been complying with, and staff is doing a really good job of keeping everybody safe at those facilities. I also wanted to highlight that today we began the Fun Zone camps, which is one of the alternatives to childcare should you need childcare within the community. We have 3 facilities that are offering those for a portion of the summer months. We still have openings for those. You can go to the city's Park and Rec page and look up the Fun Zone camps and still get into one of those should you need childcare. And with that, that's it.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Tech team, if we could bring up Tom Lonergan for our economic development update, that would be great.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. And just wanted to give a quick reminder that Reopen Montgomery program grants will soon be available to reimburse county businesses and nonprofits for expenses that were incurred to comply with state and county reopening requirements. These requirements are established to prevent the spread of COVID and maintain public health. Grants will be up to $5,000 per applicant, with a total of $14 million appropriated for this program by the county. County staff will be reviewing applications based on a rolling random lottery system. While the application process has not yet started, we do encourage potential applicants to visit the program website to review eligibility requirements and to begin gathering the documentation that will be required. That information can be found at montgomerycountymd.gov/biz-resources. And very briefly, in other news, while most of the economic headlines of late have understandably been worrisome, I did want to highlight just a few good things that are going on here in Gaithersburg that deserve a mention. Those include NIH's recent decision to move into a GSA-leased building at 16071 Industrial Drive. This move is a consolidation for NIH as they vacate space in Rockville and the nearby UPS building. The estimated investment in this project is $6 to $7 million. It's mostly warehouse use, but it does include relocating an NIH library, and we expect permits to be submitted in September. Also want to mention Kite Pharma. They are expanding at 930 Clapper Road. That work continues unabated. That's a pretty significant project, estimated to be at more than $22 million in new investment. Rio is about to start its next phase of outdoor space, which includes a new fire pit, outdoor seating, some new lighting at and around the bridge. And nearby, I don't know if you've seen this in the lake near the bridge, they're adding 3 small barges, you might call them, with seating and a canopy for some potential future concerts once those are permitted again. Starbucks at 160 Kentland Square is moving ahead. Cinco de Mayo and Kentland's Market Square is currently conducting job interviews. Rankin Noodles is coming to 133 Commerce Square Place. And finally, want to mention Mac Business Solutions, which acquired the long vacant property at 611 South Frederick Avenue just prior to the pandemic. and they're still planning to relocate their operations from Rockville to this building, bringing around 40 jobs with them. They've also submitted a toolbox application to help support their interior build-out costs. And if I may, Mr. Mayor, just wanted to add to your pride about the 3 biotechs in Gaithersburg that are working assiduously on a COVID-19 vaccine. We actually have 4. Altimmune is also making headlines. They're at 910 Clopper. And also like to mention that Altimmune, Emergent Biosolutions, and Novavax are all recipients of city funding in the past. So good work, and that's all I got.
Yeah, good work by you guys. I can't tell you what a point of pride that'll be if one of our companies ends up, or more than one, end up winning that race. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
So next, I believe we're bringing back Kevin Roman, so we can vote on the emergency ordinance. Welcome back, Kevin.
Thank you.
So at this point, we've had our public hearing. We've had some discussion. This is an emergency ordinance, so it's our intent to vote on it this evening. Do we have any more discussion, or would someone like to make a motion to approve the ordinance? Rob Wu.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kevin, for all your work on this. I mean, I don't have much more to say other than what I've said in the past about the need to do something. Now, my preference would be to do something more surgical and more directed towards those that would ultimately need relief in this situation. And so we had a discussion early on about that approach. We had discussions about adopting, for example, the county's guidelines, which would allow for the 2.7% increase. And so, not convincing my colleagues on a more surgical approach, I'm more in favor of adopting and mirroring the county's ordinance and levels in this regard, and not going ahead with a no rent increase or a 0 rent increase moratorium as drafted in the current proposed ordinance. And so I don't know, this is probably a Lynn question. How would we move forward with, would I move to amend, and would I have to have specific language, or is it enough to say mirror the county's ordinance in that regard?
You would need to move to amend with specific ordinance, with specific language to the ordinance. And it looks, I'm looking at the ordinance itself. My understanding is that the county percentage is the 2.6%. So that language should be included in the ordinance if that's what you want to do.
Okay, I mean, that's what I would support. And so, I mean, I guess we can do wordsmithing if there is support for that avenue as opposed to the 0.
We could do VRG instead. Do we have to be specific? Just put it at the current VRG.
What's VRG?
Voluntary rental guideline.
Okay. Which is what I think the county did. They just made it mandatory for the duration of the emergency. Is that?
Okay, so do we, go ahead, Lynn.
So I guess the question is, are you saying that the rate under the county voluntary program would be the rate we would set, or that we would do it as a voluntary program? I think that's.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the county has adopted, they had voluntary rent guidance previously, and it was not enforceable. It was just guidance. But in this situation, they adopted the legislation to impose the, I guess, 2.6% cap on increased rent during the duration of the emergency. And so my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the county basically made compulsory what was previously guidance. So assuming that's correct, my preference here is to adopt those levels as compulsory in the ordinance rather than a compulsory 0 rent increase for the duration.
So,
Do we want to put in a firm number or?
yeah, I mean, we're going to need a motion to amend.
Yeah, I think the county has the firm number in there. Is that correct, Kevin?
Well, they do express that it's the Montgomery County Executive Voluntary Rent Guideline. That's how it was written, in which then you would go back into the county code, which reflects of 2.6% currently.
Okay. So, well, I'm happy to wordsmith, but I mean, I'd love to hear from my colleagues as to whether there's support for that avenue as opposed to.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Neil.
So I think I'm with Rob here that a nominal increase is not out of the question. So I would propose an amendment to Section A, saying that a landlord must not increase a tenant's monthly rent for a dwelling unit on or after the effective date of this section beyond the county's voluntary, whatever the words are, voluntary rent guidelines rate, and then just insert those words right into that spot. Should do the job.
Yeah, is that
Lynn,
clear?
do you agree?
Yeah, I think if we put in the language, and again, it would be in subsection A, a landlord must not increase a tenant's monthly rent for a dwelling unit on or after the effective date of this section if the rent increase would be in an amount above the county's voluntary rent guidelines.
Yeah.
To take effect during or within the 90 days.
Actually, I think the better way, Lynn, to insert it would be a landlord must not increase the tenant's monthly rent for a dwelling unit above the voluntary rent guidelines on or after the effective date of the section, blah, 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 blah. And then B, a landlord must not on or after the effective date of the section notify a tenant of any monthly rent increase on a dwelling unit above the voluntary rent guidance during the above referenced state of emergency or within 90 days. So I think that's the clear way to insert that escalation. It ties in with the, as it currently, that would be the effective zero increase. So it's essentially modifying that language. Is that, if that makes sense?
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
I agree.
I saw Ryan's hand up. Go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I just want to give Kevin an opportunity to kind of respond to this and ask, if he could refresh our memories or elaborate a little bit on why staff recommended a 0% increase during the emergency period and the 90 days after it, as opposed to the county's model, just so we're on the same page if we do decide to move forward with Rob's proposal.
Well, we heard from obviously the tenants that had concerns about the increases and loss of income, but we also heard from the landlords where they are still incurring high utility costs, insurance payments, taxes, what have you. And we initially had some discussion back and forth. Should we go with the 2.6 or 0? And quite frankly, it was easier to start with 0 and then move to a 2.6 to provide us going back to introducing a new code.
Right. So you were basically presenting the model or the template that would be kind of the most inclusive in case we wanted to whittle it down.
That's correct.
Okay. Not necessarily because staff has a strong feeling of being wedded to the 0%.
Correct, but I mean, it still, as we've discussed in the guidance and the introduction, any increase at this point is going to be a financial hardship to our tenants.
Yeah, understood. Thanks.
Okay, Mike.
Yeah, so basically, this would be the same action as Rockville took, because after July 31st, then the allowable amount goes to the VRG. Starting August 1st. So, and I think the counties was basically the same. There was no increase until August 1st, I believe, with the county.
They actually, I believe they went immediately to 2.6.
Okay. That's all. I just wanted to point out where we were in comparison to our
Okay.
adjacent.
Well, I mean, ours is not retroactive, right?
No.
So we're not really in comparison to them. Maybe we are in the snapshot of this moment.
Yeah.
But if they passed their legislation, whatever it was, a month ago, and it was 0 for that month, and now it goes to 2.6, during that month or 2 months or whatever it was, rent in the city of Gaithersburg was able to increase
Good
at
point.
that time, where it wasn't in the city of Rockville.
Yeah, good point.
Except that you had Kevin Roman calling up landlords and saying, please don't do that.
Right. It's a practical matter. Hopefully we didn't have too much of that, but it was possible, and it probably happened in a couple of cases here and
Yes.
Just as a point of order, do we have a motion at this point?
We do, but I want to give everyone a chance to speak to it. Yeah. We have a motion. We don't have a second yet, but I wanted to give Lorianne a chance if she wanted to say anything.
Well, I'll just, restate my comments from earlier that the sunset is coming for the additional allocation from the CARES Act for people receiving unemployment. So now they will receive their regular unemployment wages, which I believe is closer to 400 is the maximum per week. And if that's about 1,200 per month. So for people who are relying on unemployment to survive, hopefully they're single and they don't have kids or other needs. I think we've all witnessed the long lines at the food giveaways. I never see a shortage, and they usually all run out of food. And I don't know what the community services division is managing or what the calls will be following the sunset of this additional monies. And so I just want us to think about those people. And this is a very minor period. And during this state of emergency, I don't think we're doing things that we would normally do. These are decisions that are not forever. And, we hope that this pandemic will come to an end within the next year. And as, Ryan mentioned, up until this is in effect, I think rent increases have occurred or are allowed to occur within the city. And so, that's all I'm going to say. As we think about this, just remember it may not be a lot to us, but to people who don't have jobs and are juggling a lot of responsibilities, 2.5% to 2.6% increase could mean a lot of sacrifices. Even more sacrifices have to be made. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have Brian?
I'm sorry. I just have one follow-up question to what Lorianne was saying. Kevin, what's the average or median rental unit, cost for rent per month in the city?
And I'm just trying to recollect what that was. I believe it's just about $1,400
For a 2-bedroom?
for a 2-bedroom.
So 2.6% of that is $36.50 per month.
Yes.
Okay. Which, I mean, to Lorianne's point, may not sound like a lot to some people, but to others, it's almost $40 a month times however many months this is going to go on. So.
Yeah, and it could cause people to make the decision to relocate, and that's the last thing we want to happen during the pandemic is people moving around. We want people to stay put and shelter in place.
Right. And it is a ceiling. So, I think many landlords may not increase at all. This is just a ceiling to prevent those who do want to increase from going beyond that. But I do think it's something we need to consider that, that $35 or $40 a month in these very trying times, particularly with the loss of the additional federal unemployment insurance, it's a meaningful amount.
Rob,
And just,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more comment, is that in the city of Gaithersburg, still a landlord would need to give at least 60 days notice prior to a rent increase taking effect. And that rent increase notice has to correlate with the rent due date.
Okay.
So it couldn't be immediately August
All right,
1st
so if
where
this
rent
takes,
could be raised.
right, so if this takes effect, there's still at least 60 days before any increase could occur.
That's correct.
All right. We're going to give this the floor to Rob.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just one last point, which I think may be obvious, is that, you know, when you're dealing with folks who are renting, you know, in this day and age, I'm sure a lot are rent burdened, but some are not. And the ability to give a landlord, or giving the landlord the ability to increase costs on those who can bear them, at least I would think conceptually would put the landlord in a better position to address the concerns of those that are rent burdened or are suffering or impacted by this this situation. So just wanted to throw that out there as well.
All right. So we have a motion to amend on the table. Do we have a second? Okay. Councilmember Harris seconds it. Okay, I'm going to call the roll. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. We'll start with Councilmember Sales.
Voting on the amendment?
This is the amendment.
Yeah, I'm a little confused just procedurally because I don't think anybody actually voted to introduce or voted to move the ordinance, and so I don't know if this is technically an amendment or just just a motion to.
I think I did say amend, but then we went off on a tangent on the language of the amendment. So maybe
No, I think what happened is that Rob moved a different version of the ordinance. There was no actual introduction of the original ordinance and then amendment, or I don't know how that works.
Okay, let the lawyers in the house
introduce, but there was no motion. There was no motion to pass the original ordinance.
All right, I'm going to go with whatever Lynn says here. Are we amending the ordinance?
No, it would be a motion. It would be a motion to adopt the ordinance as amended.
Okay.
Or with amendments. Yeah.
Lynn, do I need to restate the specific language that?
Please do.
Oh.
That was a Lynn question there.
I agree with the mayor.
Okay, so from what I'm seeing here, section C does not need to be amended because it references back to the statement of A and B. And so I move to amend the chapter 13 landlord-tenant relations, article 3 landlord-tenant obligations.
Wait a second.
You're moving the motion with an amendment.
Correct.
Moving the ordinance with an amendment.
Okay. I move the ordinance with the amended language. A landlord must not increase a tenant's monthly rent for a dwelling unit above the county's voluntary rent guidelines on or after the effective date of this section, and the rest remains the same. For B, a landlord must not, on or after the effective date of this section, notify a tenant of any monthly rent increase on a dwelling unit above the county's voluntary rent guidelines during the above referenced state of emergency, and the rest remains the same.
Okay, Neil.
That's what I thought I was seconding, so I will second it again.
Okay, then we're going to call the roll. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. Councilmember Sales.
Nay.
Councilmember Harris.
Aye.
Councilmember Sesma.
Reluctantly, I will support this. Aye.
Councilmember Wu.
Aye.
Councilmember Spiegel.
Nay.
Okay, the motion, the ordinance is adopted as amended. It carries 3-2 with nay votes from council members Sales and Spiegel. Okay, thank you, Kevin.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you all.
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's obvious, but if I may, I just want to clarify. The reason I voted nay was because I was in favor of a stricter ordinance that would have imposed a 0% increase.
Got it. Okay. And I expect that was the same for Lorianne as well, right? Yeah. Okay. Tech team, if you could bring up Jess Kwasny, we're going to talk about our Merrill Municipal League legislative action requests.
Hi.
Welcome, Jess.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. I'm Jess Kwasny, the Legislative Affairs Manager for the City of Gaithersburg. I'm here tonight to discuss the city's 2021 legislative action request to the Maryland Municipal League. It actually feels like maybe a decade since the last session, but it was only 4 months ago, and now we're almost 6 months away until the start of the 2021 General Assembly session. The primary objective for the Maryland Municipal League, one of their primary objectives, is to sponsor and support legislative initiatives that provide the most favorable circumstances for the operations of municipal governments and to choose how to best serve the needs of a diverse communities. Annually, MML invites its membership to submit legislative action requests. Members may submit up to 3 for consideration as an initiative to advance during the upcoming General Assembly session. The deadline for submission is Friday, June 24th. Once that happens, MML staff reviews the submissions and provides extensive research and information to their legislative committee. The legislative committee meets to discuss the requests as well as consider issues not resolved during the prior General Assembly session. The committee makes the final selections and the membership approves the legislative. During the General Assembly session, the city does support MML's advocacy efforts in Annapolis. I will note though that in the fall, I'll be coming back for guidance from the mayor and the city council to identify the city's policies, priorities for the upcoming session in Annapolis, which does also include the MML initiatives, from what I understand. As I mentioned, MML requests to have 3. However, the list that I did provide has 4. The 3 out of the 4 are perennial issues, and one of the issues did result from an opportunity that came about during the 2020 General Assembly session. So I'll go to the first one, which is highway, full restoration of highway user revenues. Staff is recommending to submit a request similar to the same as the legislation from last session. As introduced, the 2020 General Assembly bill would have repealed the current funding sunset in FY24, restored municipal HUR funding to pre-recession levels, provided a lockbox for municipal and county transportation funding, and tied local transportation funding to the Consumer Price Index. As a reminder, the Senate did pass their bill, Senate Bill 982, with amendments, but unfortunately the legislative session ended early and the bill did not have a hearing in the House Environment and Transportation Committee due to that situation.
Even though the House passed 600 other bills during that last stretch of the.
That's correct.
Neil wanted to jump in. Go ahead, Neil.
What is the general sense of the likelihood of the General Assembly having money to put out to things that aren't absolutely mission critical given the pandemic situation and its impact on revenue?
Sure, so that's a great question. And I have been talking with Barbara about that a lot with the with her new firm, Z&E. It's probably unlikely that they will. I think MML is probably going to have to play defense if this General Assembly session coming up. I think, you know, there will be budget cuts to local governments on many fronts, not just in this situation. But the bill as passed by the Senate last year, the amended bill struck all of the language, but just kept the highway user revenue fees the same. It repealed the sunset, so it would keep the highway user revenues the same until 2024. So we can always recommend part of the bill or all of the bill, or even just putting in a request that they defend the not having any cuts at all.
Yeah, my sense is that a broader defense than just this one area. I mean, we like highway user revenue to be restored and maintained, but the likelihood of them coming after municipalities and other local governments for other revenue cuts seems likely. So my thinking is that this item should be broadened to more revenue categories or all revenue categories to play as much defense as possible, if that makes sense.
Mhm. It does.
Hard to disagree with that logic. Go ahead, Jess.
Okay. The second issues, and in that kind of same vein, I would like to just kind of take both the issues of local authority over small wireless infrastructure and net neutrality and just say that after talking with Barbara and Dennis, you know, we anticipate that the digital divide, equity, digital infrastructure is going to really be a big issue that will be addressed in 2021. So I proposed to Barbara, and she agrees with the strategy that, again, this should be something that's more of a broader request of just defensive, protecting local government's authority regarding digital and technology issues to the extent that's possible, including but not limited to the right-of-way, land use decisions, and expenditures. And she also added that there will likely be cuts, like I said, to the local government aid, so it will be important for local governments to be able to retain revenue generating authority, which would also allow municipalities to access fees for the infrastructure deployment. And so that's an issue that we can raise in the legislative action request because it's applicable to all of the municipalities. Recommend, but not limited to all of these issues. That is a broader defense. Unless you feel that we should break them down into the net neutrality or the local authority over small wireless infrastructures. The General Assembly has deferred that action for the last several General Assembly sessions, but with the COVID-19 and following the different conversations that they're having at the General Assembly and talking with Barbara as well, it sounds like this is going to be one of the bigger issues this session.
That sounds fine, Jess. I mean, there's no way MML is going to let, particularly a small cell bill go by without our testimony and our advocacy. There's just not a chance. So, you know,
correct.
And it just makes sense.
So having a broader defensive strategy that protects local government regarding digital technological issues, again, is a more broader defensive legislative request ask that I would recommend, staff would recommend.
That all makes sense, yeah.
Okay, so that's two more defensive this year. The last one, as you may remember, Delegate Solomon introduced HB 1252. Councilman Spiegel did bring up the fact that it only would apply to the county for the ability to submit a written appeal to the supervisor of assessments regarding a commercial real property assessment within 180 days of the assessment notice. Additionally, a county would have the ability to appeal a final value or classification in the notice of assessment to the Property Tax Assessment Appeal Board, where the property is located within 180 days from the date of notice. The city asked Delegate Palakovich-Carr last session to offer an amendment that would add municipalities to the bill so that we would have that same ability. Delegate Solomon felt that that was a friendly amendment. Again, the session ended before that bill even had a vote in the committee. But I do believe that Delegate Solomon was in favor and was fine adding that amendment. So this could become a legislative request that we send to MML. It would certainly meet the requirements that they have for legislative requests. These are the ones that I presented. I don't know whether or not there are any other ideas or recommendations that the mayor and city council would like to discuss, but these are what is before you tonight.
Great, thank you, Jess. Appreciate you putting these together. They all seem fine to me. You know, they're sort of broader and could apply to multiple municipalities. And like you said, we'll come up with our own internal legislative agenda as well. So it all makes sense. Any comments or questions? I see Mike. Go ahead, Mike.
So I think overall these are fine. I think what we've learned from the pandemic and everybody, and the necessity to be able to have broadband access from a variety of settings, not just in urban settings, that we might make a little bit more progress here on this particular issue. Part of the opposition from the industry to that bill was providing funds was making investments in underserved communities, including rural communities. And communities in which there are fewer subscribers. So, and sometimes that would be a dense urban setting. So I think perhaps people, our electeds in Annapolis will understand now how important that access is to broadband and how in some cases it might need to be subsidized. So we might make better progress on that. I think the idea that we've been pushing this for a long time, it's really about preemption of local government. I think the county is with us on that. Definitely the same with the net neutrality bill. And then certainly the property tax appeals of assessments is pretty important to just the structural fiscal aspects of being able to manage revenue effectively within your municipality, within your local government. So I think that's great. HUR is HUR. I agree that expanding it and looking at other revenue, protecting other revenue sources is really what we got to do. So I don't have anything to add to these. I'm sure we'll think of something before February or January.
Any other questions or comments?
Just add to that.
Go
What's
ahead,
that?
Jess. Jess, your connection is breaking up on us.
I was just going to say to add to, oh, breaking up again? Can you hear me?
Jess,
Yes.
you may need to stop your video.
Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Speaking of broadband issues, I was just going to say that from what we've been hearing, the legislators are getting a little antsy and looking forward to the next session. And so they are interested in hearing ideas before they start getting that influx in November and December. So the conversations about the city's priorities should probably happen sooner rather than later so that we can be on their radar, as opposed to what we've done in other years, from what I understand, having that conversation October and November. We may want to do that a little bit earlier this year.
Okay.
That all sounds good. All right, so I'm seeing the guidance is general agreement with what you've put forward, and we appreciate it, Jess.
Thank you.
Do we have anything from the city attorney?
No, nothing further this evening.
And any other staff who's on the line, if you raise your hand, I'll call on you. Otherwise, I don't see any raised hands. I will remind you that we have our work session next week to discuss 700 North Frederick Avenue, the sketch plan there. And the next regular meeting of the Mayor and City Council will be on Monday, August 3rd. And until next time, let's do great things, Gaithersburg. We are adjourned.